If you take insulin, there are a few major concepts that you need to know right away. But doctors don't have time to teach this stuff. I'm going to teach it to you right here. Here are 3 things that you absolutely need to understand generally about insulin if you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. The first is that your insulin doses given to you by a doctor in a prescription are just a guess. And your insulin needs will change. If you haven't adjusted your insulin doses since your doctor first wrote that prescription and gave you instructions on how to take insulin, chances are you're not getting the right amount. If you're struggling with your blood sugar levels, if you're high after eating, or you're low an hour after dosing insulin, or you're high all night, or you're waking up high every morning, or whatever it is that's not working for you in your blood sugar management, it's probably because your insulin doses aren't accurate. Insulin doses are estimated based on your height, your weight, and your age. That's how you just get started. But if your insulin doses stay there, they're not going to work for you. They need to be fine-tuned. They need to be adjusted. Now, doctors aren't always great at doing that fine-tuning because you need a lot of information to understand which doses of insulin aren't accurate, which times of day you're too high or often going low. You need the data to find the patterns, but then you need to know things like, well, were you exercising right before that low blood sugar? Did you just take insulin for a meal right before that low blood sugar? There are so many variables that affect your blood sugars well beyond insulin and food. Trying to juggle all those things is really complicated. I teach a lot about those variables in this book, Exercise with Type 1 Diabetes. You'll learn how to manage insulin on board before activity. You'll learn why it's so important to adjust and fine-tune your basal insulin regardless of exercise. Find this book on Amazon. It's only 100 pages. When I was going through my divorce, my long-acting insulin dose needed to go up because I had this extra level of stress. Other things change your insulin needs too, like if you gain 5 pounds, if you lose 5 pounds, if you start walking every day, if you change something in your diet, like maybe you're eating pizza more often, or maybe you're eating salads more often. Anything can really affect your insulin needs. It might be a short-term change, so you just need to reduce your insulin for 1 week because you just had surgery and you're not exercising. If you're actively trying to lose weight, so you're actively trying to improve your eating habits, you're exercising every day all of a sudden, and you're actually losing weight, even just a couple pounds can make you more sensitive to insulin, which means your insulin doses are going to have to come down gradually. If you don't make that adjustment, you're going to be going low all the time, having to eat more carbs to treat the lows, and then super frustrated because you're trying to lose weight, but you're constantly going low. Gotta learn how to fine-tune and adjust your insulin doses. The second thing is that some meals actually require multiple doses of insulin. Now, if you're using inhaled insulin, this is a given, and people who are on inhaled insulin already know that. But even with injected insulin, if you're eating something that's high carb, high fat, chances are you're gonna need some insulin when you start eating, and then you're gonna need a second dose of insulin, maybe even 4 hours later. For example, if you eat a burrito or a slice of pizza, some of the carbohydrates in that meal are gonna start breaking down right away, but the fat and the protein are gonna slow down the digestion of that entire meal. Now, rapid-acting insulin sticks around for about 4 hours. So if that meal takes 6-7 hours to digest, which is very realistic for a few slices of pizza, then you're gonna need another dose of insulin 3 or 4 hours later. This is also true for things like lasagna, spaghetti and meatballs, Chinese food, cupcakes with buttercream frosting, anything that's high carb, chocolate chip cookies, high fat. Of course, learning how to make that split in your dose isn't easy. There's no manual for exactly how much insulin to take for the beginning of when you eat lasagna and then 4 hours later. It's so personal. Instead, you're gonna have to approach it carefully and take good notes. So you write down what happened. You write down how much insulin you took and when you took it after eating 3 slices of pizza. And then if you got the results that you were hoping for, definitely save that information, right? And do that again next time. If it didn't go the way you were hoping and your blood sugar was really high or really low, save that information and try a different amount of insulin next time. Taking insulin is very much trial and error. That brings me to point number number 3, which is that taking insulin is very much trial and error. Everyone's insulin needs are so personal, and your insulin needs will change throughout your entire life. The people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes who are managing tight blood sugar levels, really the biggest thing they've done is learn and study their body's insulin needs. So instead of getting mad when you go low after a meal or you're high after eating something, they look at that data, that blood sugar data, and they say, okay, I took this much insulin and I went low. Next time I eat that meal, I'm gonna take less insulin. It's not their fault they went low, it's that they got too much insulin. Blood sugar levels are just data. It tells you if you're getting the amount of insulin you need or too much or too little. But you have to put in the work to study that. If your A1C is stuck over 8% and you feel like you've done everything you can, I would still want to ask you, have you adjusted your insulin doses? And you might need your doctor's help with that. In fact, most people will, but you're going to be the one that has to start that conversation. Many doctors will just let your A1C stay in the 7s because it's so much work to try to help someone get it down. You have to initiate, you have to be proactive. Insulin is all about trial and error because there's so many variables that affect your insulin needs. For example, let's say you did finally figure out how much insulin you need for that sandwich you eat every day, and you have totally mastered dosing insulin for that sandwich. But then one day you suddenly go for a jog an hour before eating that meal. And normally you jog at night. Well, now you've just changed your insulin sensitivity for those hours of the day because you just exercised. Chances are your usual dose of insulin for that sandwich is going to be too much because your body's recovering from exercise, which makes you more sensitive to insulin in the hours after exercise. There's so many variables to learn. You can get mad about it, or you can take a step back and say, okay, what variables are happening right now that are affecting my insulin needs? If you can approach this like it's a project, a science experiment, you'll gradually develop more confidence in taking insulin and adjusting insulin, and you'll get more of the results that you want. You'll be in your target range more often. Taking insulin is not easy. Mainstream media thinks it's just like, oh, take your insulin for your meal and then you're a good diabetic. That is not how it works. It's so complicated. If you're struggling with it, you're not alone. But truly, the secret of thriving as a person who takes insulin is that you have to take those extra steps and put in the extra work to study your blood sugars, your body's insulin needs in many different situations around every different food. There is no one size all insulin dose. Learn more about insulin sensitivity and how much it can change just by exercising every day in this video.